we're back at UC IPM to make it possible to find out what I'm going to do with this disease. Now, I've decided to look up powdery mildew. So I'm going to go to the top. Instead of going as we did before with the pink tree, up in the right corner is a box with a search signal. And I'm going to put powdery mildew. And it gives me every bit of powdery mildew that's been explored. And I'm going to take the second one because it says vegetables. So I'm going to go down here. And so what I have is the quick tips. So I'm going to go to the quick tips in here because I want to go to the easy part. And it will tell me the symptoms. So you're walking through your plants and you're observing, and suddenly you notice a squash that has a twisted kind of cell structure. It doesn't look anything like a normal leaf. It's just a tiny point, and so it looks like a knot happening somehow. And you look at it, and it has a very faint piece of white. That is powdery mildew starting. We have it pretty common here, but it can be back east on things like stockwoods and things and apples. One of the things, if we go back to our disease triangle, is say, what about the host? And what it can do is it says, oh, right here, it says plant resistant varieties. So there are a lot of plants that has resistant varieties, like your fruit trees, like apple, raspberry, and peaches. There are ornamentals like crepe myrtle, roses, London plane trees, rhododendron, zinnias have resistant, and vegetables like your melon, especially your cucumbers and your squashes. There's some that are resistant. So, and beans and peas can also get it. So by changing and picking plants that won't get it makes it easier for you. The second part is that if you would figure out that you're dealing with a leaf that has it, and you just notice the first one, you can cut that off, just to begin with. The other thing that you can do is that I really like to use the environment. So you've planted your squash in a sunny place. You've decided to have fertilized right. And towards the fall in our area, the squashes all get powdery mildew and pass. But you can keep it back by doing things like rinsing off in the early morning hours the leaves, which is not in this, so that the spores, which they want to put their little roots into your leaf, can't get going. So if you wash off the spores before they root in, you can actually stop the problem, wash the disease off. So that would be a way of removing the disease. So finally, the environment, you pretty much can change the fertilizing. Where I used to have to grow squash for the children at 4-H because we had no funding. So we had to grow 364 to 425 to make funding. So we had the system going. And unfortunately, if powdery mildew hit before we hit our numbers, we would definitely not make the money to support the program. So I experimented around and found out if you take kelp with the same amount of dosage you would use to feed a plant, and I washed there's something called foliar feeding that we covered in the fertilizing part, and I took my sprayer and I foliar fed all the squash. And I noticed when we got powdery mildew, the leaves were kind of a grass green instead of a nice dark forest green. And so the plants were weak from producing these pumpkins. So what I did is I sprayed them with the kelp, which had all the micronutrients, everything they needed. They greened up. They got almost luminescence in their green. And if I caught it when it was just a tiny bit of powdery mildew and cut the ones off that I saw, they actually produced better. They came back for a couple more months. So looking at your plants and seeing how healthy they are, because disease is dis-ease, not eased. So you're trying to make sure your plants are healthy. Healthy plants are not attracted to insects as much. They look for those. And healthy plants are not attracted for diseases as much. So by using the disease triangle, and you can go to these sites and you'll be able to find the chemical means, which is sulfur or copper, to get rid of it, mostly sulfur. And you can't apply sulfur when it's hot or you'll burn up your plant like toast. So you have to be under 90 degrees. And And those are the things you need to look at. You can use this system with the disease triangle, remembering the parts, and being able to keep your plants growing without disease. And removing any part of that, a host that won't get sick, or a disease that's not there, or an environment that's not favorable, will help you grow plants with less disease.